14 years ago, my parents took me and my little sister camping over Memorial Day weekend in Northern California. I was 11, she was 7. The campground was packed with families, RVs, dogs, and loud music. It felt safe because there were people everywhere. My parents kept saying, "Nell, nothing bad could happen here." That first night, my sister woke me up around 1 a.m. "There's someone outside," she whispered. I told her to go back to sleep. I figured it was just people walking to the bathrooms. Then I heard it too. Footsteps circling our tent. Slow crunches on the gravel. They'd stop for a few seconds, then continue again. I remember staring at the thin nylon wall beside my face, realizing how easy it would be for someone to cut through it. The footsteps stopped near the back of the tent where my sister was sleeping. Then the zipper moved. Just slightly. An inch maybe. I froze. A flashlight beam slid across the inside of the tent before disappearing immediately. Whoever it was zipped it back shut and walked away. I shook my dad awake so hard he thought something had happened to my sister. He ran outside with a lantern, but by then, nobody was there. The next morning, another family across the campground was gone. Not checked out. Gone. Police cars arrived around noon. Apparently their 9-year-old son disappeared sometime during the night. The campground shut down for hours while officers searched the woods. They found the boy before sunset, wandering near the highway, crying hysterically. He kept saying a man had pulled him out of his tent while his parents slept. The man only ran because headlights appeared on the road nearby. I'll never forget that day, as it could have been my sister instead. My parents never took us camping again. I was 9 years old the Memorial Day weekend my cousin disappeared for 3 hours. Nobody in my family talks about it now because technically she came home safe, but I still think about it constantly. Mostly because I was the last person who saw the man who took her. Every year, my family rented cabins near a lake in Oregon for Memorial Day. There were always tons of people around. Families grilling outside, teenagers setting off fireworks early, boats everywhere on the water. It felt impossible for something bad to happen there. That Saturday evening, my cousin Ava and I begged our parents to let us ride our bikes to the camp store for candy. It was only about half a mile away down the main road through the campground. My uncle finally agreed, but he yelled after us, "Straight there and back." We promised. I remember the exact moment things started feeling wrong. About halfway to the store, an old red pickup truck passed us slowly. Not unusual at first. Cars drove through there all the time. But then the truck stopped ahead of us near the trees. The driver leaned out the window smiling. "You girls headed to the store?" he asked. He looked maybe 40. Baseball cap, scruffy beard, sunglasses even though the sun was going down. Ava answered before I could. "Yeah." He kept talking casually, asking where we were staying and whether our parents were nearby. At 9 years old, none of it sounded dangerous to us. Adults asked kids questions all the time. But then he said something that made my stomach tighten. "You two can throw your bikes in the back. I'll save you the ride." I immediately shook my head. Ava laughed awkwardly and said we were okay. The man kept smiling, but something about it looked forced now. "You sure?" he asked. "It's getting dark." Then another car turned onto the road behind us, and the truck drove away fast enough to kick dust into the air. I remember feeling relieved. We got our candy and started riding back about 20 minutes later. By then, the road was quieter. Too quiet. Halfway back to the cabin, Ava realized she'd dropped her stuffed keychain somewhere near the store and begged me to help her look for it. I told her no, because I wanted to get back before dark. She got annoyed and turned her bike around. "I'll catch up," she said. That was the last time I saw her that night. When I reached the cabin alone, everyone panicked immediately. At first, the adults thought she was just messing around somewhere nearby. Then, an hour passed. Then 2. The police came. Search teams walked through the woods with flashlights while my aunt completely lost it, screaming Ava's name. Around midnight, police found her sitting beside the highway nearly 6 miles away, crying, covered in dirt. She kept saying a man told her he'd help look for her keychain, then grabbed her and threw her bike into the back of his truck. She said he drove for a long time before stopping near the woods. What saved her was pure luck. Another car had pulled onto the road nearby while the man was trying to drag her deeper into the trees. He panicked and drove off, leaving her there. Police never found him. But the next morning, officers searched the campground and discovered 3 other kids had reported a man in a red pickup talking to them over the weekend. That's the part that still makes me sick. He'd been hunting for hours. "14 years ago, my parents rented a huge old house near the beach for Memorial Day weekend because my entire family was coming into town. There were 14 of us staying there all together: grandparents, cousins, aunts, uncles. The place was crowded and loud constantly, which is probably why nobody noticed something was wrong right away. I was 12 and sleeping on an air mattress in the upstairs hallway because all the bedrooms were taken. The first weird thing happened the second night. I woke up around 2 a.m. because I heard footsteps above me. Slow footsteps, back and forth. At first I thought one of my older cousins was awake, but then I remembered there wasn't a third floor, just an attic. I listened for a while, expecting someone else to react, but nobody did. Eventually the footsteps stopped. The next morning I mentioned it during breakfast, and my uncle laughed and said old houses make noise. But later that afternoon, my younger cousin started crying because her suitcase had been moved. Then my grandmother noticed food missing from the kitchen. My dad blamed one of us kids sneaking snacks overnight. That night, I woke up again to the sound of movement upstairs. This time, I could hear something dragging across the floor above me. Then a loud thud. I sat up, terrified. A few seconds later, I heard the attic door creak open at the end of the hallway. I remember staring into the darkness, waiting for someone to come down. Nobody did. Eventually, I got enough courage to wake my dad. He was irritated at first, but he grabbed a flashlight and checked anyway. I followed behind him, even though he told me not to. The attic stairs pulled down from the ceiling with this horrible creaking sound. The second the flashlight beam swept across the attic, my dad stopped moving. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at. Then I realized someone had built a small sleeping area up there. Blankets, food wrappers, water bottles, and piles of newspapers. My dad immediately shoved me backward and told me to go downstairs. That's when we heard movement from the far side of the attic. Someone was still up there. My dad yelled, "Who's there?" And suddenly a man sprinted toward the tiny side window at the back. I only saw him for a second. Dirty clothes, long hair, extremely thin. He climbed out onto the roof faster than seemed human. By the time police arrived, he was gone. Officers later told my parents the man had probably been living in the attic for days before we arrived and simply stayed hidden while 14 people unknowingly slept underneath him. The part I still can't get over is this. The attic entrance was directly above where I slept every night, meaning every time I heard footsteps, he was probably standing just a few feet above my head, watching us through the cracks in the ceiling. When I was 8, my family drove from Arizona to visit relatives in Texas over Memorial Day weekend. It was supposed to be a fun road trip, but the only thing I really remember is the woman at the rest stop. There were 5 of us packed into a minivan. My parents, my older brother, my little sister, and me. By the second day, everyone was tired and irritated from being in the car too long. Around dusk, my dad pulled into a nearly empty rest stop somewhere in New Mexico. I remember the place feeling strange immediately. No other families, just a few semi-trucks parked far away, and one older green sedan sitting near the bathrooms. My mom took my little sister inside while my dad stayed by the van checking directions. My brother wandered toward the vending machines, and I sat on a curb kicking rocks around. That's when the woman approached me. She looked normal enough at first. Maybe in her 30s, blonde hair tied back, sweatshirt despite the heat. She smiled and asked my name. I answered because kids are taught adults are safe. Then she asked where we were headed. I shrugged and said, "Texas." She looked toward my parents before crouching beside me. "You want to see something cool?" she asked quietly. I remember noticing her hands shaking. Before I could answer, she pointed toward the green sedan and said she had puppies inside. Even at 8 years old, I knew that sounded weird. I stood up immediately and started backing away. The woman's expression changed instantly. The smile disappeared completely. She grabbed my wrist hard enough to hurt. "Come on," she snapped. I started screaming. My dad turned around immediately and sprinted toward us. The woman let go and ran for the sedan while another person, a man I hadn't even noticed sitting in the driver's seat, slammed the car into reverse. They peeled out of the parking lot so fast the tires squealed. I remember my dad hugging me while yelling for someone to call the police. Until this day, I still wonder what would have happened if I did go see the puppies, and what if they ever kidnapped any other kids.